Um, I'll be speaking. Let me quickly share the slides I have prepared. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen, but okay, now it's better. It was in our orientation, but now it's okay. Thank you.
Okay,
I can see it.
excellent. So, like I said earlier, my name is Batana Ideji, data scientist, ML engineer, and today I'll be speaking on open source for data scientists and ML engineers. Um, I'll be speaking on this topic for some time today, and we'll proceed from there. Sorry for the weird introduction. Okay, so before we begin, let's start with what is open source. Um, Open source refers to software or programs that people can modify and are publicly available. So this refers to any program or any initiative or project that is open to the public, whose programs or code or software basically is publicly available. Anyone can join it and anyone can modify it as accepted by the project moderators and community leaders basically. So while the term open source originally refers to softwares and programs and specifically coding methods and coding programs basically, the term has been co-opted to refer to a set of values beyond just code and software development and things like that. So it refers to a broader set of values that is usually tagged the open source way, which is where projects or products or even initiatives are built up and created through an open exchange of ideas, transparency of process, and participation selected through meritocracy and community-oriented growth. So this kind of builds upon the idea that open source is a kind of alternative method of building a project or building a product, whereby the product is maintained and built by random people that have been chosen because of the merit of their work and have decided to contribute their time to this initiative. And you usually have a group of community leaders who select things that need to be added to the project through a meritocracy method. Basically, anyone that is good enough and can make positive impact on this project and can make positive impact on this project is allowed to make positive impact on this project. So it's an open exchange of ideas, and the entire process of building whatever product or initiative or project that you began in this method can be seen in completion. There's full transparency. There's full transparency for it. So, okay. So why is open source important in data science? And how does it help data scientists and ML engineers? So when I kind of started to get into open source and participate in open source projects, I began to realize just how important open source is to data science and data scientists. Um, I realized just how many packages, how many software programs that data scientists make use of that actually rely heavily on open source. I listed just a few here, but there are a lot more. RStudio and Jupyter Notebooks are coding IDE platforms that are built completely through open source. TensorFlow is an ML machine learning package, one of the most popular machine learning package. Another example of a machine learning package built through open source is scikit-learn, which is perhaps the most popular machine learning package and is also built completely through open source. There is Streamlit, a data visualization and model deployment application that is built completely through open source. There is ggplots, which is a data visualization package built through open source, and even more popular and more famous and more popular examples, things like pandas and numpy, are also built largely through open source. And it was kind of an eye opener to realize that a lot of the packages I use in my everyday life and a lot of the packages I make use of all the in my work basically were built through open source. And as a data scientist, anyone that is actually into the world of data, you realize that even from this short list I have listed on screen here, you can barely do anything on your project without making use of one of these. They are the most commonly used package for data science is VS Code, Jupyter extension, and Google Colab, both of which operate largely through the help of Jupyter notebooks. So it's kind of the backbone of what you do as a data scientist. If you decide to proceed on to ML engineers, you cannot operate without using scikit-learn or TensorFlow, and both of those are also built largely through open source packages. And so it makes it introduces us to the idea that data science as a program in general runs largely through the support of the open source community. And once you begin to understand this, it's quite easy and quite understandable to see how a data scientist wants to give back to the open source community. And which was why when I began to get into open source in a more conscious manner, I found it very surprising that data science was almost a marginalized part of open source projects. And it was quite a shock to me because I had expected it to be a lot more common and a lot more prevalent in the open source community. But surprisingly, it was a marginalized part, and it was very you could very rarely find data science projects to commit to as an open source practitioner. And I was shocked and really surprised. So I began to look into the reasons why, and I began to realize some of the few challenges that you face trying to commit to open source as a data science, trying to add to open source as a data scientist. And that's what this my talk today will largely be based around, discussing these challenges and how to overcome these challenges. Just so to ensure that any data practitioner in the house can go into this fully aware of the problems you'll be facing and can proactively create ways um, to overcome this problem basically. So before I dive into that, let me just give you a few brief overview of some of the open source projects I've committed. I've some of the open source projects I've participated in the last couple of months. The first one I highlighted is the ASO Analysis Strike project, which is an open source initiative created by a GitHub user to investigate the efforts and the effects basically of the 8 month strike that occurred in Nigeria last year, academic strike that occurred in Nigeria last year on the performance of the university students. The second one is the NSAT chatbot, which is still ongoing, which is a program by the National Society of Chemical Engineers, Lagos Division, to create a chatbot to help students in preparation for exam. Goes on Fitness was for the company Goes On, which is a fitness company to help them overbook their classes with data in mind, so they don't have missing attendees, and to basically predict when people will be missing, so they can overbook their classes without fear of having to provide spaces for people when they're filled up. And the last one I participated most recently is besides the chatbot is the Forage Guide, which was hosted by BCG, British Consulting Group, to kind of a rundown of the basic consultancy projects hosted by BCG basically. So that's a brief breakdown of some of the projects I've participated in. So let's discuss the challenges of finding projects to participate in as a data scientist in open source or even as a data analyst. And the first one is data science is a relatively isolated stack. Um, when I was kind of preparing for this, I realized you could divide most tech tracks into two platforms. You can divide anything in multiple ways, but dividing on the idea of open source, you can divide tech tracks into two platforms. Those that can work alone and those that instinctively have to work with other people. And on the idea of those that can work, they have to work with that. We have the developers. As a front end developer, once you begin your journey into front end, you are going to quickly realize that you cannot deploy a full project on your own without working with others. You will need a backend engineer to create the backend of the website for you. More often than not, you need a UI UX engineer to help you design the website before you can begin your own work as a front end designer. The same thing goes for backend. If you create all your microservices and you build all the dependencies in the backend, you still need a front end engineer and a UI UX engineer to help you deploy the project in full. And those platforms, those tech platforms, they all work hand in hand. So they understand the importance of community in a tech world, in the tech world basically. But for tracks like data science, it's and data analysis, it's relatively isolated. I'm sure every data scientist that is will have begun and completely gone through projects all on their own, from top to bottom, end to end. It's called end to end data science project. That's what's called in the data world, and it's built to be able to you are built to be able to do it on your own. Any data scientist that has been well trained can gather data themselves, perform EDA, sorry, and deploy, create the model and deploy it all by themselves. So we've been trained to work alone, and so we don't really understand the benefits of communities as a group, and that's one of the basic challenges. We're not actually incited to participate in open source communities because we don't see the need for it in our own day-to-day life, except you actually begin to look into it and realize that a lot of what you actually use was built through open source. So the second challenge is barrier of entry, and this is perhaps the most interesting one. And that was because I would love to be able to say that I kind of thought about open source and then I went to look for open source projects to dive into. But you realize when I spoke earlier, I said when I consciously began looking for open source projects, and that's because I'd already been participating in open source projects before I realized what I was actually doing. And but anybody that wants to that consciously goes in looking for open source projects without any previous knowledge and just wants to participate in open source, perhaps heard about Hacktoberfest and you're a data scientist, I want to join in. And so you go on GitHub and you kind of begin looking for project that is in line with your track or your field. You will quickly realize something that I'm calling barrier of entry, and that is that there is no intermediates for the open source. There's no intermediate in data world for open source participants. You are either writing documentations and correcting errors in the README file, or you are building methods and building functions for things like pandas or scikit-learn or popularly TensorFlow. Um, and that's a very wide margin of skill. Sorry, that's a very wide margin of skill. One can be done by someone who just has basic data knowledge, doesn't even need to know how to code, and the other one are being done by experts. And it takes a lot of skill to be able to contribute in that on that level, and the kind of skill that is rare, and the kind of skill that most people don't have when they're starting, or even when they're 2, 3 years down into the business. Being that skilled is it takes a long time, and so it creates a big barrier of entry where the largest group of data scientists um, can't really participate because those in intermediate and even some late level beginners would not want to spend their time doing documentations and correcting readme files and stuff like that, while those that are experienced enough and can actually do more than that are few, and you cannot build a tight knit community among themselves, and it's not really easy to break into that community. For instance, the TensorFlow community is quite famous for not really accepting new members. It's not that they don't accept new members, but it's really difficult for you to actually have a successful commit with the on the TensorFlow GitHub, and that's because they are quite. It's really high level, and before you can convince them that what you are actually imputing is not going to break the entire system, it takes a lot, and they are kind of famous for refusing pull requests basically because it doesn't meet up to the very high standard they've created. So that barrier of entry is one of the biggest challenges for contributing to open source as a data scientist, or at least contributing to open source in the traditional way. there are ways to circumvent this that I'm still going to discuss further. So finding the right project. The next challenge is finding the right project, and this is generally about the idea of the fact that data science is quite large as a field. As a data scientist, you know you have to deal with web scraping. You will deal with visualization and dashboards. You will deal with computer vision. You will deal with text to speech, and the wideness of the field makes it so that you actually have to really specialize in whatever you really want to do, and kind of you have to learn wide and you have to learn deep. You have to learn everything, but you have to be really good at some few things because you can't really be good, perfectly skilled at every single aspect of data science. It's so large a field basically. So finding the right, so because the projects are few and it's not really easy to find something to commit to. When you do find something, it's quite possible that it's not really in your area of interest. And for instance, this Oktoberfest basically, I recently found a project that it's that it's a really good project for data scientists actually, and it's building a product that will actually be used in the future, and it's open for Oktoberfest. But it's a text to speech project, and it's not really something I have a lot of experience in. I've I've learned the basics of it, but I've not really had a lot of experience in. So because of that, I couldn't really join the project. Because even while it's having a really perfect project for any data scientist to join, because it's not something I'm really skilled in, I found myself unable to join it. And that's one thing that a lot of data scientists really experience in the open source field. There's a large, it's quite large. So finding the right project to contribute to it's not quite easy. So the fourth and final challenge I listed is the lack of a proper guide. Um, the idea behind this is when I was preparing this presentation, basically, I kind of went on YouTube to view if other people are giving similar topics or discussed more about data scientists in open source. And what I found, despite kind of fine tuning my search term a lot, they will bring out data science specific videos. After I scrolled past the first three videos, I began to find open source videos that were no longer targeted towards data scientists. And I don't think I found up to 5 videos specifically speaking on the experience of open source as a data scientist. And even on the first page, there were more videos in other fields than on data science itself. And that shows a lot because data science is not really known for contributing to open source. So there isn't really a proper guide on how to do it as a data scientist. As a developer, front end or back end, you find a lot of people speaking about it. There are a lot of good first issues and things like beginner friendly hashtags that are actually beginner friendly and good first issues for developers to join into. So, but that doesn't really exist for the data science world because it's because of the barrier of entry basically, and you don't really have a proper guide to dive into open source as a data scientist. So how do we overcome these challenges? It's one thing to know the challenges and it's one thing to know how to deal with them basically. So how do we overcome these challenges? So the first thing I've detailed here is embrace the variance. Like I said earlier, data science is quite large and extremely varied. So if you really want to contribute towards data science, you have to embrace the fact that data science is quite large. So come back to the earlier example about the text-to-speech project that I couldn't contribute to. The group that created those projects actually created three. One was a text-to-speech project, one was an image classification project, and the last one was a and I while I couldn't participate in the text to speech because I didn't have that much experience in it. I am currently participating in the image classification and the regression analysis because I'm well experienced in those areas basically. So I found three areas, and while I wasn't able to contribute to one, I was also able to contribute to two, and that's because I've embraced the idea that data science is quite large, and I try to learn as often as possible. And one thing that I do quite often is accepting of challenges and projects in areas that I know I am not skilled in, kind of give myself a motivating factor to learn something new. For example, I spoke on the NSAT chatbot project I was contributing to earlier, and it's going to be using the project is using AI, OpenAI, LangChain, and ChromaDB. And it's actually that's project is my first time. It's the first time I'm going to be using ChromaDB and LangChain. I have some experience with the OpenAI API before this, but I had not really used LangChain and ChromaDB, and I knew this very fully well when I was accepting the project. But I just accepted the project in the idea that I'm going to learn on the job. I'm going to learn how to do it on while I'm contributing to the program. And I turned in my first commit about 2 weeks ago, and it was accepted without any problem. So that's one thing you have to understand. You have to understand that the field is large, and you have to embrace that. And like I said earlier, learn wide and learn far. You have to learn a lot of things, and you have to deepen your knowledge in as many things as possible, because that's really the only way you can make an impact as a data scientist, as a data professional in general. Um, Embrace the variance in the stack and lean into it. You can't keep spending all your time doing similar projects. You can't keep spending all your time performing regression analysis. You can't keep spending all your time doing ED or statistical analysis on similar kind of builds. You have to go wide, because if you don't, it will be kind of redundant, and you'll really be limiting what you can do as a data scientist. Um, on average, data scientists use at least 4 languages and more than 3 various applications for the work they do. Um, when I actually saw this, I was quite surprised that I know up to 4 languages, and I started counting it. And I don't mean spoken language; I mean programming languages, by the way. And I actually started counting it. The first one every data scientist will know is just basics. You either know Python or you know R, and so that's one already. Then you know SQL, you don't know MySQL or PostgreSQL, that's 2 already. You have to know a bit of HTML for web scraping, that's 3. I learned a bit of CSS when I started working with Streamlit for dashboard, and I counted 4. And I was quite surprised because I didn't even realize that I knew that many. And because it's really more of a developer thing to be counting languages, just be a simple front end engineer, just as basics, you have to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Just for you to even call yourself a front end developer, you have to know those 3. And it's not really that common in data scientists in data science as a track. Sorry, you don't really hear of people learning multiple languages, just really deepening their knowledge and learning multiple packages rather than languages. So I was really surprised to learn this, and it's kind of corroborated the idea of data science as a large track, as a very wide track. Because sorry, data science is a very wide track because that's why we have to learn multiple languages, and you'll find yourself using multiple applications, perhaps Power BI or Tableau, or perhaps not even perhaps you have to use Excel or spreadsheet packages. You have to learn spreadsheet packages. You have to learn tabs as a data scientist, and so that kind of shows how large the field is, and you have to learn to lean into that largeness to be able to contribute as a data scientist into open source. So the second method of overcoming this challenge as a data scientist or as a data professional in open source is to expand your definition of open source. I know as I've been speaking like this, a lot of us has been thinking of GitHub, and for instance, this program is hosted by GitHub Campus experts. The entire Hacktoberfest project is largely hosted on GitHub and other platforms like Bitbucket and stuff like that. So, but as a data scientist, you very, very quickly find out that a lot of projects on places like GitHub are actually more suited for the developers and cyber side of tech. Um, the front end, back end, UI, cyber, and the cyber aspects of tech, cyber security. Sorry, I was trying to remember. And cyber security, you won't really find a lot of projects that lean into the data science aspects of tech. And so you have to think beyond GitHub. You have to think beyond GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, and other applications like that or software like that that help facilitate what traditional open source is like. And one method you can use to do this is to look into open data initiatives. The most popular of this initiative is Kaggle, which I'm sure a lot of us will know of as data scientists, if the developers on the call don't really know it. As a data scientist, you are most likely head of Kaggle and other data banks. And all these data banks actually have a method of donating data to them. So as a data scientist, if you really want to projects that you have to go gather data yourself, that you have to collect data on these projects yourself, one of the first things you should do after you're done with the project, or even during still, try and contribute this data to these data banks. I'm sure a lot of us data scientists will have used data they've gotten from Kaggle. I personally have. And those data were contributed by people like you and I. And that's one of the best ways you can contribute to open source as a data scientist. Contribute to open data initiatives, contribute to building data banks and donating data and helping gather data for various wide projects. Another method you can do is creating blogs and tutorials. If you've ever worked on a project and you run into a problem that you couldn't solve on your own, and you had to get some help to solve, and but you realize that that help was not really forthcoming and was not really easy to locate. Once you've solved the problem, write a blog post on it, write an article on how to solve the problem, create a tutorial, and help. And by doing this, you're going to be helping other data scientists, and you're going to be helping build the community of data scientists, which is largely what the open source way is about, community-oriented growth. So that's what you'll be doing by creating blogs and creating tutorial. Another thing you can do is running documentations and creating tests. While there might be, while there might, indeed might be a large barrier of entry in actually fixing problems with packages like pandas and TensorFlow, and in that way you can commit and help to those commit to those packages basically is by running tests and reviewing documentations, by seeing areas where in your use of these applications or these packages the results don't really corroborate what the documentation says it will do, and you can point out those issues to the developer community. And a very good example of this is pandas. Pandas has the method of reporting issues to the GitHub repository. So if you spot any issues while using pandas, you can go there and report the issue. And by doing this, you are contributing also. You are helping them run tests because it's a really expansive library. And even though they have checks within themselves, things are still going to leak through. You're still going to notice things while using it. And once you notice things like this, you can report back to it. And that good and that good and that sorry, lost my train of thought for a bit. Another good example is Power BI and Tableau. They have methods where if you spot a bug in their system, rather than exploiting this bug or complain about this bug, you can basically report back to them. And some of them actually have price pools or benefits for doing things like this. And you can actually get paid for doing things like that. And this also runs into the idea of bug spotting. Just in your everyday use of packages and your everyday use of platforms and applications, if you notice anything that is wrong, or you notice anything that isn't working as it should be, you can report things like that. And that's what's called bug spotting and running tests and reviewing documentations in your everyday use of data science packages, basically. So finding the right project. The RISE project can help provide a more rewarding experience. As a data scientist, if you really work on something you enjoy working on, it's more fulfilling and more rewarding than working on something random or working on something you actually don't enjoy. Personally speaking, I prefer working on ML projects to other type of projects. So I find spending my time building machine learning models more rewarding than performing statistical analysis or other aspects of data science like that. So when I find projects, so I try to find projects that lean expand the things I can do, but it's always going to be good to find things that lean into what you're currently enjoying at the moment, what you currently enjoy building, so you can deepen your knowledge in those aspects. So in order to achieve this, you need to learn how to use search filters, sorry, to narrow down the noise of other projects that you can't contribute to. Look for projects with tags like good first issue or beginner friendly. Explore the GitHub explore section. And even during this month of Oktoberfest, the Oktoberfest website as a platform um, for for locating projects. And this platform, they have various methods of filtering, basically, where you can filter by language type, um, where you can filter by language type, filter by skill level, and using tags and things like that. And it's really help you in finding the right projects for you, because it's quite difficult, I'll be honest with you, to find projects on places like GitHub and Bitbucket for your use as a data scientist. So you really have to put in the work in looking, and learning more about these kind of packages can really help you narrow and lessen that workload. And finally, um, embrace AI applications. I spoke earlier on the lack of a middle ground for data scientists, but the use of AI application is really making a lot of work towards covering that middle ground. AI applications provide a method for data scientists to reliably participate and contribute towards data projects, because using AI applications, you can build a countless number of resources and projects, like the example I gave before, building a chatbot to help chemical engineering students in preparation for examinations and tests, and even just to study generally. And that's what AI can empower you to do. And as a data scientist, it's right up your alley. It's something you should learn how to use as a data scientist and an ML engineer. So embrace the power of AI. I know you hear that a lot nowadays. Everything is AI, but it's quite popular because it's very useful. And it's going to really help to bridge that gap between doing basic documentation reviews and reading corrections to building larger things for places like TensorFlow and Pandas. So AI application is really providing a center field or an intermediate group for data scientists, where you can really project your skills and make an impact without learning how to get to a level where you can contribute to things like TensorFlow. So that's really one of the largest ways and one of the most inspiring ways you can contribute now as a data scientist. And finally, you can build your own projects. Build your own projects. As a data scientist, you're going to have to find that you have to build your own projects to really make an impact. For example, I've given a few examples of projects I've worked on, but out of the first four I mentioned in that slide, it was only one that I didn't know the only consciously going to open source data scientist. I realized that was in it, and I made conscious efforts to grow my presence in it. But I basically stumbled into it just through having the right community. Um, a friend of mine brought me to the astro analysis project. My department in University of Lagos is the one that created the NSAC chatbot project, and the president of my department brought me into that project. The Goals on Fitness project I learned about from a data group I was on, and it was really only the forage project I kind of went searching and found on my own. So, as a data scientist, it's going to be good to build a strong community around you. And if you realize any problem, you can build a project to solve that problem yourself, and bring in other data scientists and other groups, other members in your community. And one of the more inspiring things is the NSAT challenge that I've spoken quite a few times about already. Well, I've participated in multiple projects over the past year, and the NSA Charter project was really the first time I was opportunity to participate in a project where the data professionals were more than the developers on the group. Um, we currently have just two front end developers and two back end developers, while we have as many as four ML engineers working on the project already. So it was kind of inspiring to see that it's providing a field for us where data scientists can really be spearheading the contributions in areas like that. So you have to learn to build projects that will inspire other data scientists to join, and build projects that data scientists can participate in. It's going to be something you're going to have to do as a data scientist. If you find you can't locate projects on your own, build your own projects. With that, I am done. So thank you very much for having me. Really grateful for the opportunity. If you have any question, let me check the chat. We saw some in the chat. Okay, so it seems there are no questions for me. Um, so the Gate of Contact experts, Brian, do you have any question for me?
Okay, hello. I'm Caroline. I'm standing in for Brian. Thank you very much for that session. It was very enlightening. We've gotten to understand the kind of challenges that people face in data science. And I think at this point, I open the floor first to our audience, our lovely audience. In case you have any question, you can always unmute and ask. You can also send it in the Q&A section or also send it in the chat. Okay, so just a follow-up of what you've talked about. You said if someone does not find their own project, if someone does not find a project to contribute to, they should build their own project. So what kind of project would you recommend for a beginner in data science?
Okay, as what kind of project I recommend for a beginner to data science? MLSA, sorry, Microsoft Learn Student Ambassadors. They recently, Lagos chapter, they recently built a bunch of projects for beginners, and the project was using basic tools for that data scientists have access to actually perform and help things. And one example of the project was predicting a student's scores based on study habits and historical data, basically. So they built a Streamlit model, and they built a model and deployed it on Streamlit, and it does provide a full. They, sorry, they built a project and deployed it on Streamlit. So you provide the application basic information and it presents
Okay,
you with
so sorry,
much of.
Abatan, just to cut you short. Ruth, you are on unmute and you're distracting the session. Kindly mute so that we're able to listen to one another. Rich Victor, um, you are okay. Thank you. Thank you for muting. So yes, Abatan, you can carry on.
Thank you. Like I said, using the basic, even the basic tools of a data scientist, there is a large number of things you can build. And the example I gave of the MLSA Students Ambassadors Program, where they used historical data and reading habits to predict the performance of their one students in their university activities. You find you can build things like that as a data scientist. Another example is the Goal Zone Fitness program I gave earlier, where you are really just using basic regression analysis to try and predict how many students will actually attend the class based on data given. And there are a lot of things you can do like that as a data scientist. Another example, I had a couple of people discussing about in my community. I didn't participate in it basically. Was building um, a, an application to help small businesses keep customers. Basically, they collect a few information from the customers, and then they try to predict which customer will return and which customer will not return. And all of these projects use really basic SM data analysis method. If as a data scientist you can already complete a simple end-to-end data science project, you can contribute to this kind of project. So just look around you, notice what is lacking, and notice what you can use data to fix. And that is the kind of project you want to build on your own. Anything that you believe having just the right data and the right prediction capacity can help you fix, you can do it with data science. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that insight. That question was well answered. The audience, if you're part of the audience and you have any follow-up question, always feel free to unmute and ask the question or send it to the chat. So now, since there's no other question, I would also like to hear your opinion on, you see, there is a trend where developers and people in tech are using generative AI as sort of their assistant. So, what is your opinion on the same? Would you encourage that for a data scientist? Or, yeah, generally, what's your opinion on that?
Um, so using of generative AI to enhance your work basically, I think it's something we have to all have to accept that it's not going anywhere before we even begin to discuss on opinions or what I really think about it. Um, it doesn't matter what any of us think about it. It's just far too useful a tool for it to be abandoned. So I think the best approach to it is to learn how to use it yourself, because it's not going to go anywhere. And if you refuse to learn how to use it, you are just going to get left behind eventually. Um, I think it's largely best used as a crutch tool rather than replacing your entire workload. It's more useful for lightening your workload. I've personally used it myself in the past, not really in the largely generative sense, but I've used AI to assist on practically perhaps like the last 10-ish projects or um, analysis I've worked on in the past. I've um, used AI to assist me one way or the other. Um, Whenever I'm coding, because I code primarily on Google Colabs, I always make use of an AI called Monica to help me spot errors and um, find ways to streamline my code basically. And I also make use of IntelliSense. So it's not going anywhere. That's the be all and end all of it. You have to learn how to use it yourself because it's not going to go away. And you should learn it and try to use it to assist your own work. Try to use it and improve your work, not replace your work basically. That's my opinion on the entire matter. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think, um, yeah, there has been a saying that if you do not learn how to use the AI, people who are using AI to like make their work to enhance their productivity are definitely going to replace in their workplace. So thank you very much for that insight. And I see we have no further questions from the audience, and our time is almost up. So thank you very much for your time. Maybe as you could give us a parting shot and share your socials, and then people could link up in case they have any question. They could just follow you and ask questions. What's your parting shot? And also share your social media handles.
Okay. Let me drop my handles in the group chat. So on LinkedIn, I am at Agro. Um, on Twitter, Abatonayodg. On X, sorry, X Twitter, still used to call it on Twitter, Abatonayodg. And those are really the two I use largely. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Oh, and GitHub, sorry. Oh, sorry, that's a mistake. On LinkedIn, I'm Abatonayodg. On GitHub, I'm Agro. That's an error there. Let me correct that. So I thought I was writing GitHub there. So on GitHub, I'm Agro. On LinkedIn, Abatonayodg. That's mistake on my part. So in closing, I think the most important thing I've said so far is still the idea of data science being quite large and having to lean into that. It's not something you can really overstate. I've seen even I've had a decent amount of experience so far, and even at my level, I've still seen data science projects that I really cannot contribute to, because it's just basically at the fringes of my skill set, and it's always going to be like that as a data scientist. I've seen people more experienced and more learned than me who have done things that I can't do, comment on things I have done that they can't do. So it's really just about going wide and learning as much as possible. And that also ties back into this talk about AI. You also have to learn that and keep staying up to date on the field, basically. Thank you. Um, I believe Merceline has a hand up. Merceline.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she does. Carry on.
Yeah, sorry to bring this up when we're closing, but I have a question. So, first of all, thank you for this session. I have never done open source and I would like to do open source. So do you have maybe other resources to help someone who has never done open source to know how to do open source? And I don't know if there are specific ways of contributing to open source, and if it just means doing part of a project with other people. I believe that is what it means. And yeah, I just wanted to know if there are other resources, if there are videos on maybe how to get started in contributing to open source. Yeah, because I've never done open source. Thank you.
Okay, what's your stack? Are you a data scientist? I'm asking.
Yeah, I am currently still building my data science skills. I'm currently learning AI, machine learning. And previously, before getting into this, I used to do web development.
Okay. So for web developments, just go on GitHub. You'll find plenty that you can work with on GitHub. But for a lot of people work in AI and machine learning, I'm putting a repository on the group chat right now. The one I mentioned earlier that was built by MLSA. I'm putting the name of the repository on the chat right now, so you can go look into that. It's an excellent resource for data science. It allows you to basically use what you've been learning as a data scientist to contribute to the project. Because that's one of the really biggest problem. There's kind of a divide between what we learn as data scientists and what we actually need to contribute as a data scientist. So you have to, so this will help you do that. And since you mentioned you're just beginning, um, do you have experience with Git and GitHub?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Because you will need that for the project I just put on the budget. So that's the name of the, I just refer to the chat right now. That's the name of the repository. AI October MLSA. They have 3 projects live right now, and sorry, they have 3 projects live right now, and you can join one of those. And perhaps I'll share this with Brian afterwards. But I also work with ECX, and they're currently building a repository of projects for GitHub for data science and other fields. Once the ones for data scientists are created, I'll share them with Brian, so he can share them back with you. Beyond that, that's all I can help with right now. Okay, you can also check Pandas. The Pandas platform have a lot of good first issues. I was able to contribute to one for my for Hacktoberfest basically. They have a lot of good first issues. Surprise more than most. You mentioned you're still quite early in data science, so I don't know how effective that will be for you. But for someone who is a bit more experienced, you can actually check that their their issues are easier to contribute to than other such large platforms, basically. Thank you.
Okay, so Marcy, if I got her name right, I hope you've got your question well answered. And in case you have any follow-up questions, you can always reach out to him on social media, yeah, or even ask in the chat in case you have any follow-up question right now.
No follow-up question. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry for that. Okay, you're welcome. So thank you everyone for your time. You've been a lovely audience. Abatan, you've made a wonderful presentation, and definitely we've gotten very many insights on how to contribute to data science and AI in open source. So it's bye-bye for now. Until next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Goodbye.
very much. Yeah. Goodbye.